Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me in this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today, on episode 120 of the podcast, we welcome back my friend, colleague, co-author, and co-host of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, along with Dusty Jones, and associate professor of mathematics at the University of Arizona, Dr. Jennifer Wolfe. Hello, Jen. How are you today?
Hi, Joel. I'm doing pretty well. It's good to be with you again in so many different spaces. I'm glad I'm able to join you on the Amidon Planet podcast.
We've kind of had a run the last month when I came out to the Math Educator Appreciation Day in Tucson. You kind of showed me around.
Right. Yeah.
Got a chance to do that.
Having lots of good conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to take you around town, just see some different places. And then I know you got to go to a lot of really cool sessions as well as facilitate a session. So,
that's a really good conference. And even for those that are not in Arizona, because if you're a math educator in Arizona, you can attend for free. Am I right? But even if you're not in Arizona, the hybrid sessions or the online versions were awesome. We're awesome. Good people are there. Arizona has lots of good people that love the university, love Rodrigo and Melissa and all that they do. And so there's lots of people that are coming to share good stuff. And so that was a conference. And then also, too, we just saw you at AMTE, which is the exact opposite experience of Tucson, where I was out and about experiencing Tucson, where I believe the only time I stepped out of the hotel in Reno was to pick up my Grubhub order. So that was a kind of sad, but it was joyful inside because getting to connect with everybody. So
yes, that's true.
Well,
I don't think I got out much either. I mean, it was kind of cold, and at this point, I'm solar powered. Even though growing up in Kentucky, right? I should have probably gotten out, but I didn't. Yeah.
Well, the pool was heated. I didn't know. I never went to it, but I guess
this was the pool that was. I didn't actually go to the dance club, but the pool was actually in the middle of the dance club, right?
I think there's another pool. There's another pool. Yeah, that's a different pool. And anyway,
a different pool.
Yeah, that's a different pool. All right. Well, this leads us right into our topic for today. We just wanted to try something out, maybe just hit play and have a topic to talk about. And today, what I wanted to talk about, given our experiences over the past month or whatnot, is how to attend a conference, right? How to attend a conference. And I was trying to think, what are some, with almost, 20 years as an educator and attending a lot of conferences over the years, and, thinking you got something figured out. And so, I don't know, when I gave you that prompt that's what we're going to talk about today, what popped in your head?
So I immediately went to, okay, what were my first conferences when I was thinking about graduate work in math education? And so the first conference I ever attended was AERA.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
American Educational Research Association, which is one of the largest conferences. I mean, the largest conference I've ever been to. It's like, what, 20,000 people back in the day?
It was so many people.
Yeah.
And it was across, this was in Quebec, Montreal.
Nice pronunciation.
And so we got to go to Canada. So it was my first conference as a math graduate student, and it was international, right?
Wow.
Or not international. I guess it was.
What?
It was out of the.
It's in another country. That's international.
It was in another country. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's how some of those small airports get to have. It's an international airport in some small town.
That's true.
Because it goes into Canada.
Experience for sure. But yeah, like you said, it's like back in the day, it was so many people, and it was across multiple hotels, different venues, right? Within walking distance for the most part, or they would have I think they had shuttle transportation. I could be conflating that with National Council of Teachers of Math Conference, but I think they had shuttles. I don't remember. I walked everywhere. And with the prompt that you gave, I was just thinking, what's kind of been my journey? Well, I did it. I don't know if I would say I did it wrong, but I did it to the point where to exhaustion. So this was my first time going to a place where I was going to go into sessions of people whose work I had read.
Yeah.
So you have these ideas of who these people might be, or you're really interested in their work. And so I took the schedule and I was like, I'm going to fill it up.
Yeah.
So
It's like
every
like
day,
high school, just every,
I,
no study halls, just
there was
go.
no study halls. It was like, oh, I guess I'll go grab lunch, but what do I miss during the lunch times? Because they schedule and stagger things, right?
Yeah.
And then just figuring out, okay, I stacked the schedule back to back to back, but then not realizing that some of them I'd have to have backups because either they would be full or I didn't have enough time to get between the two.
Yeah.
And
Because
by the
again,
end,
multiple hotels, right?
multiple hotels.
Like that
Hmm.
are not necessarily right next to each other. Yeah.
No, and there's overlapping sessions, right, with time, and maybe you won't have time to get to the next one. It was just a very overwhelming experience. I think I went in thinking there is this grant that is supporting me to go to this conference, and I feel like to fully participate, I need to go to every single session. Like I need to
Right.
be the whatever a good graduate student is,
Yeah.
right? Because
You're right.
maybe this is going back to like being a first gen or just like making sure that I'm doing right by people who are spending money on me to do something.
Yeah.
But
I'm
I
gonna
didn't really know
I'm
any
gonna get the
better.
most value for this conference registration
That's
as
right. I
possible.
mean, someone's putting some money towards this, and I want to make sure that they feel like they're getting their value out of me going to all these sessions. But what I didn't realize is how exhausted I would be. Like, and I carry that feeling with me because it's like you don't have to fill up all your schedules, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to go back to back to back. And I think it helped me with the next conference I went to, which is the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators. So the conference that we were
Yeah.
just a part of
AMTE.
last week,
Probably
AMTE. And
in
so my,
either
yeah,
a 50-50 shot. It was either in Irvine or Orlando.
funny, it was in Tampa. So that
Oh,
particular
whoa.
year,
Wild card.
2006, it was in Tampa. And so I'd learned lessons from AER. AMT is different too. It's much smaller. And at that time, it
Right.
was definitely smaller than what we have now.
Like
And
maybe
so
300-400 people back then, probably.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. And so much smaller community. And so there was much more time to have conversations. A lot of the sessions I went to were directly connected to practice. And so that was really, it just felt like, to use our colleague Dorothy White's phrase, it's like being back home in a way that it felt very relational. It felt very being at home, finding like-minded people. And as a graduate student, that community was very open, like very welcoming. I think in some cases when navigating conferences, you can be kind of nervous to like, or at least this is my experience. I was nervous to go up to people and ask them like about their work. And these are people that I had read about, right?
Yeah.
And so I was nervous to do that. But at AMTE, I felt a little bit more empowered because it was such a like much smaller community and they were much more, it felt welcoming
Oh,
of
very
graduate
welcoming.
students.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
So so I actually told you one of mine at, because I don't know if Dorothy, I guess Dorothy invited me to come talk to our STAR fellows, the Service Teaching and Research Math Education fellows that were having their meetup, right? Or regroup
mhm.
or reconvening. I don't know
Yeah,
what
the reconvening for like the
yeah.
pre-conference to AMTE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a chance to come talk about networking which I thought was right on the money to our folks. And I was mentioning the first conference I went to was as an undergrad in Madison. There was a regional NCTM conference at our beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright inspired terrace, Monona Terrace. And I went and held doors and volunteered. And Meg Meyer asked me to do that, and then in exchange for volunteering, could go to the conference for free. And
Mm.
same thing, going to go meet people. But I had a very like a mile marker moment during that conference where I went and heard the guy who invented Sketchpad, Geometer Sketchpad, which was a big math ed
That was
software.
huge then. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
at my placement we used it, and so it was cool to like oh wow, that guy, math ed famous, right? And so like went and watched him talk. It was a great talk, but then I had some questions and things like that, and I felt a little bashful to go up after, which I would totally do now, like after the talk and go talk to him because there's another session coming in and didn't want to bother the person. But then later on in the expo center, their vendors, all setting up. Well, he was down there because they want to sell Geometer Sketchpad, and you could talk to, him. And so he's just standing there. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to go talk to him. And I mean, he was happy because otherwise he's just standing there. And so I had a conversation about using it in my placement and had some questions that were answered. And it was like, wow, this isn't just like a movie or like TV shows, right?
Mhm.
The sessions are like shows, and like you're filling up your session. It's not like that, like, hey, I'm just watching all these shows, and because there's no interaction with the TV show, right? You're just watching it, and maybe you talk about it with somebody, but you're not going to interact with those that are putting on the show, right? Well, here, no, actually it is like, this is an interactive process. This is like, people are presenting ideas and thoughts and things how to use it, but also they're receiving things too. They want to interact with folks because, like, inventor of Geometer Sketchpad, how are people using it? What are some ways to make it better so that you can, make it better for the next time you're going to present it and put it out there. So, like, these ideas and things that, like this, I guess, wisdom that we have from attending all these conferences and thinking about it, and like, hey, let's just put an episode together about how to attend a conference. So I have a little bit of setup. All right.
Okay.
So I was thinking about prerequisites, right?
Okay.
Some prerequisites. All right. So first, you gotta find your people. You gotta find your conference, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
right.
like, thinking about the conferences that you have identified and why you've identified it, hey, these are the ones that I want to go to or I have gone to, and like they're on the radar of what I would want to attend. So, what's out there for you? Like
Oh,
with Dorothy talked about in her talk, she talked about this is home, right? And so thinking
Mhm.
about where is your home?
This is a great question. I think for prerequisites, it's almost like I needed to attend multiple conferences that I heard were related to the field that I work in. So math education, right?
Right.
So folks would say, oh, you need to go to AERA. You need to go to PMENA or PME, right?
Psychology of Math Education North America chapter. It's a mouthful, but yeah, that was one for Wisconsin that people said. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Right. And then you've got AMTE, which we just Association of Math Teacher Educators, National Council of Teachers of Mathematics.
Uh-huh.
So that came up. And then some of the smaller conferences like RCML came up.
Yep.
So I went to that one year.
Research. What is it? What is
Research
RCM?
mathematics.
College Research Conference for Math Learning?
I think so.
Something like we'll put a link in the show notes. We'll find out.
I got encouraged to go to some international ones. Like I know we talked about AMTE, but also ICME. So I went to ICME when it was
International College of Math
conference on
Education.
mathematics
Yep.
education. So I went to those. So I think the prereqs are like figuring out which conferences are related to the field that you work in.
Yeah.
And then trying to go to at least those conferences a couple of times just to see like where do I kind of fit? Like what seems to be related to the work that I do or the ways in which I want to grow as a human being, as someone who does different aspects of my scholarship work.
Yeah.
I think prereq is figuring out what are those conferences, like shoulder tapping some of your colleagues or your peers or other graduate students and saying, hey, what are some conferences you heard about that I should be interested in? And then trying to attend those conferences early in your career so you can kind of get a sense of where to go.
Yeah. Well, and some of them have, like, you think about some of the intents of some of them. So like AERA research, right? You can have like more of a research focus. PMENA, more of a research focus. AMTE, a little bit of both, right?
A little bit of both. Yep.
Research and practice. And then NCTM, mostly associated with practice. Like there's the presenting to other math teachers, but then you could also be talking about math teacher educators and the studying of math teaching as well. And they've combined the research and the practice. So a little bit of both as well, but more, I would say more focused on the practice part. And then, some of the other ones like ICME and RCML and, like, I don't quite know, but I mean, I would assume ICME, you know more about that, is I would assume more researchy, right?
And it has some practice in there
Okay.
too. Again, I
Yeah.
went a while back, but I think going to them multiple times is also, I think, kind of a prereq because different organizations and conferences change and evolve in different ways. And so what might not have served you before might serve
Right.
you now. Because you
Yeah.
were just talking about NCTM, and I know historically it's been more practice based across K-16. And as you said, more recently, they've integrated. So the NCTM Research Conference used to be separate from the annual conference, and
Yep.
now they've integrated them.
Yep.
And
They
so
would
it
overlap a
might
little
be.
bit, but yeah, now they're completely integrated.
And
Yeah.
so that may be now that space is open up to you depending on what your research is. And also, like your trajectory, and drawing on Dorothy, right? She did these different chapters of her life
Yeah.
in her on her road to getting full professor, that I think we also have chapters, right? There's the chapter
Yeah.
of our graduate work, there's the chapter of working towards tenure, there's the chapter of going up for full, as she was sharing. And so I think that has an impact on the conferences that you attend, and
Yep.
eventually later on the different leadership roles that you might take in those different organizations.
Yeah. So finding your people is good. And, but also too, just to make sure people, when we're talking about Dorothy, we're talking about Dorothy White. She was
A friend of the
shared
podcast.
friend of the podcast. She's come on and talked about being full professor. When I got that tag, we talked about that,
It was
and
a great episode.
she's a delight. Exactly, but she. But yeah, talked about AMTE as her home, right? That those are the
Yeah.
people, and that's right. That's right where she's living in that research practice area. Like that is the kind of stuff that she likes, and I think that's kind of stuff we both like too, as well. Talking and being able to talk in the research areas, we able to talk in the practice areas, interacting with lots of different realms, but then also people that care a lot about what's happening in classrooms. So I think that's important. One thing I did want to, oh, and also too, Dorothy got
I think it's
awarded.
interesting. Like one of the phrases. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say Dorothy got an
The Judith
award,
Jacobs
the
Award.
Judith Jacobs Award,
Right.
which is amazing. She deserves that. So it was awesome to hear her get a platform, be able to talk, and she did a great talk about Oz, about Dorothy and Wizard of Oz and the Wiz. We wove them all together. It was pretty cool. Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
No, not at all. I was just thinking when you said find your people, a couple of things came up for me. It's like in the conference realm, finding your people. So one of the ways that I found my people was through food. So you
Yeah,
find friends, you go, like AERA was one where it was kind of like a reunion for some folks because different colleges and universities will have reunions at the end. So then they'd have like these
true.
receptions. And so you get to know people over
Yeah,
food. And then as I got to know more people, we also started doing things like, okay, who's like top chef, master chef, or whoever in the city we're about to go to. So finding the people where you can have those shared meals and
yeah,
start building those relationships. I think about while this isn't a national conference, you and I got to know each other a little bit more through the Smarter Together conference,
yeah.
where we were learning about complex instruction. When was
Mm-hmm.
that? Like 2013, 14?
Yeah, that was when I really got to know Dorothy through because I got to go to Georgia right before then on an SECU grant, and then and then we had that Smarter Together Complex Instruction Conference. That was a big thing. I mean, my if any student of mine listen to this, that's where most of those activities that I do in class came from that conference. So yeah,
I think that's part of it because, like, you're one of my people. And that was one of the ways that I found you and how our relationship has kind of grown and how we've taken on different roles in different organizations.
yeah. Well, and so it is for. I guess I'm a little bit more introverted than maybe I put out sometimes,
Oh, I'm
and
100% more introverted. Like
yeah.
when you asked me to join the podcast, I was like, okay.
But having the one-on-one conference or conversation in at a conference situation, so like when you're sitting there watching, someone talk, and then you can like look over and be like, "Hey, can you want to talk about this thing that we're watching?" Kind of like how people like watch TV shows together and then they talk about the TV show. It's like a way, it's like this is a topic to get something going. And so whether it's an idea, a thought, we just had our roundtable discussion for the Math Teaching podcast where we talked about the opening panel. Like those are conversations like, hey, I need to process this. And I guess that's going to go into one of my objectives down below. But first, we're still in prerequisites for a second. Hold on. All right. I say, so your carry during a conference. Now I know your backpack weighs 20 pounds, but for me, I want to make sure to have, a coffee cup. Okay. A sealable coffee cup that I can shove in my backpack, a water bottle, and mints.
Yep.
Those three things. Cause one, you want it, cause sometimes, you might be, enter into a session that might not have the liveliest of speakers. So you want to be attentive. So you want to have that coffee. And then also too, a lot of times there's free coffee around and then you want to be able to grab it, seal it, put it in the bag just in case you need it for later. Water bottle, always want the water bottle because a lot of these places are dry and you just like start, you want to keep the fluids going. And then the mints, because you've been drinking coffee all day. If you're going to go talk to somebody, you might want to pop in a mint just to make sure you're all fresh before you start blowing dragon breath into someone to admire space.
Those are really good. I would also add chapstick.
Oh, yes. Good call.
Because all the talking. I think moving here to Arizona, the water and chapstick have been huge. I mean, I'll add sunscreen depending on where you're going. But yeah, I agree. You definitely have the coffee mug. You need the water. You got to stay hydrated. Mints.
Yeah.
Definite. And then, I like to carry some chapstick with me.
And also, too, if you're thinking about going, submit a proposal. If you're thinking about going to a conference, put something in and, think like, well, what do I really have to share? If you have experience, if you have a perspective, there's something to share. A lot of times, even if with a research conference, like I haven't done a lot of research. Well, maybe you have an idea for research and that could be a good thing for like a poster, which is like, I kind of think of it like a half-baked idea sometimes, or like someone is like, hey, it's half-baked now. By the time it gets in there and it's like, maybe gets accepted, it's more baked. And so I could even say, hey, here's some data we have. Here's some questions we've been asking. Here's what we collect. Here's some ideas I'm thinking about for a dissertation. And then you're in a poster session where people are coming up and you get to have a conversation with them, get some feedback on it. So submitting a proposal, I think is, if you're going to put in the effort of going, also maybe put in the effort of trying to present and share your knowledge.
No, I agree with that. I think I've kind of looked at submitting a proposal. One, you get, experience communicating your ideas or just sharing things that are just seeds of ideas. And it also is an accountability measure. It's like from my own experience, I found that if I put in a proposal, that will keep the conversation going. There's an accountability of I'm going to have to present something around this idea that I have with either just myself or with others. And so in particular, I remember doing it around my dissertation work. It was like, okay, wait a minute. Let me go ahead. You don't have to wait until your dissertation. Like I presented before the dissertation.
Yeah.
But I just remember thinking, okay, if I put my, some of the things I've already done in the first few chapters of my dissertation and put that into several conferences and propose it, then I really need to be on the ball of analyzing the data, really staying with the data. So there's that accountability piece.
It's good pressure. It's good pressure.
It's kind of like good pressure and just submit the proposal. I really like you're just saying, just submit the proposal, because then when you go and present it, I know some people have mixed feelings about posters, but I really enjoy posters because I really feel like I get to talk to people as they come to the posters. And I've gotten so many great ideas by having thinking partners who just come to the poster.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think Pat Herbst, who was, I think at this conference, he might have been doing a keynote. It might have been a PMENA in Columbus. No, that would have been later. Anyway, there was something where it was Pat Herbst, and who was pretty big in our field. And I presented something on teaching math as agape. I think the poster, I think you can see the bottom corner of it over there.
I see it.
Yeah. And Pat came up and talked to me about it. And he was asking questions. Like, again, this is someone in the field, like he's been the editor of one of our major journals, the Journal of Research in Math Education. And I remember, I think it actually was in Reno, because now that I think about it, I think it was a PMENA in Reno.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a small airport. And I remember walking to my gate, and Pat is like at a Sbarro, like getting a slice of pizza or something. And he looks like, "Hey, Joel, well, hold on, come here." And like I was like, "Oh my gosh, Pat Herb's calling my name. One, he knows my name,
Mhm.
but he's calling me over, and he's like, "Hey, I was thinking about this person. Have you? I think it was Randy Phillip. And I think about Randy Phillip's work or something like Randy Phillip, his work, and saying like, "Hey, have you thought about this angle to your work related to his work?" And I was like, "Wow." Like, and wrote it down and like, went and thought about it. And it was just the fact that someone took the time to one, invest in me coming over and talking to my poster, invest in my ideas, and then thinking about, how to make it, and like actually thought about it later and like, hey, I want to make sure this person gets this information. And so that was kind of amazing. So I appreciate it when people do that. And they want to do that. That's the thing. They're at the conference too.
Mhm.
They want to learn and they want to still see what's going on with the field, and they want to have those conversations because that someone invested in them and they can pay it forward in those moments.
Yeah. These are good prerequisites.
Yeah. So okay, so we got our people, we got our kind of everyday carry, and we're talking about submitting a proposal. So I got some things, and we're kind of overlapping a little bit with stuff we've already talked about, but I just want to make sure I got like maybe five things. So and this kind of goes in with a little bit of what we already talked about already, sharing your knowledge, both
Hmm.
formally and informally, right? And so that could be like investing of, with Pat talking about something, going up to a poster, either doing the presentation. If you're going to do a presentation, do it well. There's your formal, but then just all those connections, that informal opportunity to share. No,
Hmm.
that's the whole point. Is like the conference is about people getting together and for these ideas to like mesh and interact with each other, bounce off each other, productive collisions, if we want to put it that way.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
so, thinking about that, your perspective, even like someone's coming up and someone's sharing something in a presentation, and it's like bouncing off of something that maybe you do in your work, and you're like, I wonder if they thought about this. Like, ask the question. Either
Yeah.
again, like ask the question or provide the anecdote or whatever it is. Like, have that interaction because maybe it makes that idea better. And so now that thing that this presenter has already said, like, can even be better. Or even thinking about maybe they have a perspective like, hey, but have you thought about this? And now the thing that you're thinking about, ooh, wow, that changes the way you're thinking. So for people to have those opportunities to share their knowledge and share their brilliance, right? Put their
Yeah.
brilliance out into the world like that in that exchange. I mean, that's part of the beauty of the conference is having those
Mhm.
sort of interactions.
Yeah, and I wonder, I totally agree. I was just thinking about the ways in which we share our knowledge.
Hmm.
So when we were at AMTE, that opening panel with the podcast that just came out in the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, it was a focus on how do you move from like this idea of transactional to relational.
Yeah.
So this made me think about the connection to your when you're sharing knowledge, like how are you sharing feedback and knowledge at these conferences? And it's almost like an orientation that I want to say that you need to come with, or you should consider coming with. Like, let's say I go to a presentation, um, I might start off with sharing the ways that their work has impacted me, or the ways that their work got me thinking about an idea before even saying, have you thought about? Because I've been in spaces where, like, after I give a talk, it's immediately, here's what you could do to fix this. Well, if
Uh,
that's the feedback I wanted, that would be great, but it kind of puts you on the defensive. So I'm always like, how do I first kind of look at it? What are the strengths that I see, or how did it push my thinking? Like, I love going to sessions that push my thinking, or sharing knowledge with others in
right.
relation where it really pushes my thinking, and also highlighting like the ways it impacted me before like going into, have you thought about, or what are some stretches of the work, or what are some growing areas? Because I think then people might be more receptive to the types of feedback that you're giving, or the ways in which you're sharing your knowledge.
Right. Oh yeah. Because we've both been in sessions where it's like, how can we outcritical each other, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, and I guess that goes, someone is taking a risk, right? Especially the
Mm.
one that it's got their names up on the board. And then a lot of times it could be doc students or someone that's presenting for the first time, and they took a risk to come on and they put their neck out there and they're saying like, hey, I'm giving you're giving me 45 minutes and I'm going to do the best I can with it. And maybe it's not the best thing in the world, but they're doing their best with that time.
That's right.
And so, yes, how do we honor that? Right. And not just
Mhm.
say, well, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? But yeah, even say like, here's the things that I'm hearing from you. And like, even when we were talking to the folks that did the panel, that we just did that TMT podcast about, we interacted with some of our, colleagues and friends that were on the panel, and like they were even thinking about that idea of like transactional and relational, and maybe they might have initially like almost accidentally set it up as like this false dichotomy, but it's a mix, right? Even like we get a chance to go to a conference, and like yes, when I'm presenting at a conference, there is a transaction. I'm getting something to put on my CV, and like maybe
Yeah.
you're getting some knowledge to inform your teaching. Like there is a transaction, but then there's also could be like, but I genuinely care about you and like what you've learned, or like what the knowledge that you're sharing, and like like it's not just the out critical each other. Sometimes becomes, well, how can I posture right myself and put
Yeah.
myself at a certain stage and be seen from all these people versus like also be in relation with somebody and saying, hey, have you thought about this? Like, yes, I'm hearing this, and I'm saying the good stuff, but then also too, hey, have you thought about this? Because this could be an aspect you haven't quite considered yet, out of
Hmm.
genuine care for someone in their
Yeah.
development, even if it's someone you've just met, like a new teacher or a new
That's right.
someone like to or a doc student that's just trying to make their ideas better. Like, hey, this is awesome. Like, and here's some things that we've done, and that we both. I've taken this from you, you're taking it from me, but now we're both getting better out of genuine relationship. And so there could be some beautiful things there. But yeah, like where's our intention? Where's our heart at? Right.
That's right. Like, where's our heart? Where's our intention? And I think because you and I come from a very relational perspective, right? The academy is set up very transactional, right? So we're trying to be more relational in a system that's set up to be transactional. So I try to be very mindful of that, but it's also kind of just my nature. Because I was thinking, with the STAR program, I often share with the early career folks that there are people that we centered our friendship and relation first, and it wasn't explicit in that way, we just did. And then like I'm thinking about our good friend Farshid Safi, who just came in as president of the Association of Math Teacher Educators, AMTE. And Farshid and I met in 2010, and we did not publish together until 2022. Right. And I'm thinking, Joel, we've known each other since 2014, probably
Probably
13.
like that. Yeah.
Right. And we just now have 2 book chapters that'll come out this year.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
we're in this system that is very transactional. So I think people who function, I guess, or not function, but people who roam in academia, how are you trying to build like relationships with folks and do the work that you want to do? Right.
Yeah.
We can hold both at the same time. I have to really push back against the transactional stuff. Because you know what? I don't enjoy writing with people or being with people if we don't have that relationship first. Because then it's the transaction that's driving things and not the relationship that's driving things.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, so on the one hand, somebody hears that, wow, you've known those people that long and you have a lot overlapping in common, and then you didn't publish with them. And it's like, well, that's maybe wasted time, right? You could have been,
Yeah.
putting some stuff out there versus, maybe that's a badge of honor too. Like, hey, we built this relationship, and then to the point where it's like, hey, let's write something together. And so like, yeah, we had
Mm-hmm.
that call for book chapters, and we're like, let's do something together. We'll
Yeah.
both submit chat. We'll both make our chapters better, and we'll put them out there, and we'll see what happens. And now they're going to both be published, and we'll put a link to that because I think that's going to be available for purchase in the near future. AMTE's Volume 6, about like building community within
Mm-hmm.
math teacher education. I don't have the title exactly, but I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But I mean, that was kind of fun. And now it's thinking about, well, what other things can we work on? Well, obviously we do the podcast
Well,
as
and it's
well.
not just centering the publishing, right? Because you could say like people might argue, well, that was a lot of time and you haven't gotten any publications out of it. But what I will say is that the depth of conversations and the thinking partners that I've had through the friendships and relationships I've built have helped me better understand the ways I can make a contribution
Hmm.
within my sphere and beyond, right?
Yeah.
So I think the time we put into certain things like that, the relational piece will, I mean, will come to fruition, I guess. No, I don't know if yeah, I mean, that's how I look at it. Like, I don't think I've enjoyed writing at all when it felt like it was very transactional, right? This idea
Yeah.
of publish or perish kind of thing. So, yeah.
Well, and if you're going to invest some time and some work and you have a relationship with somebody that you can do that with, that you enjoy their company, like, hey, more the better, right? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
like actually, this is probably the number one thing that I put on my list is take advantage of opportunities to connect. So especially, if you have, people that you are separating yourself from, whether it's your classroom or your family or, your context, your neighborhoods, right? If you're going to remove yourself and go somewhere and spend time, like take advantage of those opportunities to connect, right? And so trying to be present in those spaces and say hi to those you admire, connect with someone about ideas, thinking about, both during sessions, but then after sessions, between sessions, breaks, meals, you know, think about what are those places that you can, hey, I'm going to spend some time with this person. And I think about that is like invest. Yeah. Not, I mean, invest in the race. It sounds a little transactional, but you do have a chance to invest in those relationships. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I think I don't know where this would fall, but I'm thinking about how with AERA that first time or going and just stacking and just like back to back to back sessions that through my experience I've learned like sometimes blocks like I don't go to things so I can give time to process and reflect on the things that I've gone to and also make space for sharing knowledge with friends, right? Or just catching up and specifically making time and space for like I could go to a session that's at this time, but knowing that spending time with networking and being with friends and colleagues and just like talking, whether that's about your scholarship or about life, is a way to kind of navigate those conferences too.
Yeah. So, those, so I was thinking of we had some pretty good conversation. I think it was PMENA in, I want to say Greenville, maybe. Did
Might
you go
have
to that
been.
one?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where we had a nice chat.
Yeah, we had a nice chat. But it was like you had something from your own teaching, and I had, a perspective that you wanted some insight on, and that led to a dinner with a pretty long conversation. And it was like we both provided some, insight and some value, some connection there. And it's like, and I think that was kind of a foundational conversation because we've had interactions and we did,
Yeah.
friendly with each other and stuff. But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's an issue that we can really dive into. And so
It was
that,
very helpful, right? Because you had shared different parts of your identity, and it was an aspect of your identity that I had a student who had similar, like maybe lived experiences. And I was like, Joel is someone I know who's had some of these lived experiences. So let me tap him to see, like, how could I better support this student in ways that I don't have as much knowledge in? And I think that led to some really good conversation and some sharing of knowledge that has helped me think about different things that we talked about that I've been able
yeah,
to apply in different aspects of my life. So that's been good.
yeah. Um, Another one is, and I don't have another. This is a poorly phrased one. Is like it's okay. Like have your mind blown. And what I mean by that is like seeing
Yeah.
like some of the big names in the field. Like if like at like I went to AERA in Chicago, and Gloria Ladson Billions was a part of a panel with other like AERA like lead former presidents, I believe, and then
Mhm.
I think Jeff Duncan DeAndrade
Okay.
am I missing, like hosted that panel. And it was just like all those folks I admire that are on the like
Yeah.
I was looking at the stage, I'm like, okay, this is this is gonna be good. And I remember like I was writing in my notebook and it was just like just soaking it in, right? And it's like if they're putting this something like that together, I'm trying to think of like even we've just this past conference have Robert Barry, right, and then Dorothy White, you right, Julia Guerre. Like I missed that conversation because I had to moderate, but I was like heard like these award sessions that were happening, and it was like yeah, you probably should like go and like they all have things that you're like when you hear it, you're like, holy cow, like it just it fills up your I'm excited to be an educator meter, It just goes
Hmm.
all it's like my tank is full, my cup overfloweth, right? So
Yeah.
those sorts of like have those moments. Bob Moses.
Hmm.
I heard Bob Moses in Kansas City and it was like it was a barely there wasn't a lot of people there. It was a regional NCTM conference. He was the first session. I actually ran into him outside of Starbucks. It was like one of my, first conferences as a doc student and I'm like that's Bob Moses. So I followed him from Starbucks to the session, sat there, and just heard him just, I mean, it was just diamond. He was sprinkling diamonds everywhere. It was like awesome. It was awesome. And I was so excited to get to hear him. And then because there wasn't a lot of people there, I walked up and said, hey, Bob. I'm not, hey,
Really?
big fan, first time, long time, So like, see, it's go to the big, go hear the big names. It's good. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
they're big names for a reason. So
No, I agree. I mean, that's what I was thinking. One of the things that I do more now is that, or even just this last conference at AMTE, I went to the featured sessions, right? The award talks, the opening panel.
yeah,
I went to my own session
that's
and
good.
then maybe a couple of others, but I really focused on catching up with folks too.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of keep going back to some things that Dorothy White and I remind each other of is that what is this experience teaching you, right? So, what is this session teaching you?
Right.
Every time you go into a space, whether you think that session was useful or not, it taught you something about your scholarship
Yes.
or will inform it in some way. So, I think whatever sessions you go to, just maybe that reflective question of like, what is it I'm taking away from this experience? How does it influence my thinking and my scholarship?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it'll be like mind blown, like there's so many gems that were dropped that I have to think about. And then other times you're like, I don't think I'll ever get an hour of my life back, you know? And
Yeah.
so I'm like, but what did that session teach me about some aspect of
Right.
relationships or my scholarship or just anything, right? You can
Yeah.
always take something from any situation, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder about this. Like, I had a crisis moment at it was a AERA, so American Education Research Association conference in San Francisco. I was in a roundtable session where I was not going to be even having a seat at the table. I was like ninth author on some paper. Very thankful. Thank you,
Mhm.
Amy Ellis. And so, but I got a chance to attend and but I get there and like it's over. It's like AERA is just so overwhelmed. There's just so many things, but also too within AERA there's divisions and SIGs, and so there's some like ways to like pare it down to like okay, what are the special interest group and research and math education presentations? Like I go to see those. Well, I still was just like, what am I doing? I just sat down. I sat down like in a hallway. Like there's so many people. Was one of the. I just sat down and I'm like, I got to figure out where I'm going, and one thing that really helped me on that conference, and I try to do it on other ones where there's just like how do I make sense of this? Is try to like find a thread. So either sometimes there's strands that are set up, but then there was like one session caught my eye. It was on hip hop based education. It was a
Mm.
panel, and it had Chris Emden wasn't there, but he was on like Skype at that time. It was connected in, and then there's the I think David Stinson, not that dude, it's David Stinson, that's another person. But it was somebody that from University of Illinois at Chicago that does hip hop based education with like social studies. Can't remember
Hmm.
his name, but Sammy Alim, I think, was the moderator from Stanford. He did some work, and so like there was like this is interesting. I'm just like, what is hip hop based education? So I just went, and then from there I kind of followed that as a thread. There was some other like there was a books a session with there was a book, an edited book with some folks, and they had again folks from that talking at like a panel later on, and then that was also connected with this idea of culturally sustaining pedagogy with
Hmm.
Samuel Leem and Django Paris, and who also had Gloria Ladson Billings come because they were like
Oh.
building off of her work to get to culturally sustaining pedagogy from culturally relevant pedagogy, and it was like I kind of built something like, oh wow, I'm learning what this thing is, and now I'm seeing. Okay, so how does this go in? How does this maybe represented within culturally sustaining pedagogy? And so like I was able to like almost like build up like almost like a lit review around this area, got some resources and talked to some of the authors because they had, books that they were trying to sell later on and saw them in the expo hall. And so it was cool to get from somewhere that was like, I'm overwhelmed. Why am I here? You get a little imposter syndrome going on. Like I have nothing, I'm not even talking at this thing. And though I'm, like from there to, hey, no, I've now built up something on this topic. And
Hmm.
so trying to, you know, you have almost like a goal sometimes can be helpful for these things that,
Hmm.
hey, I want to learn more about X right here.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know what X is before you get there, it might be interesting.
No, that makes sense. Like, I want to learn more about this and then maybe do a search through the program because some of those programs can be quite large. So, doing
Yes.
searches, whether it's like people whose work you've read and you want to find them, or if it's particular ideas that you're wanting to explore, I don't know if that's a prereq or not, right? Like thinking
Yeah.
about how to build your program and
Actually,
then
yeah.
like,
Get the
yeah,
program. Yeah, get the program beforehand. Yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah. And then
Uh,
figure out, yeah, what are those sessions I might want to attend based on things I'm interested in? Or maybe there's things that in times when you go through the program too, like, oh, I've never heard of this. I think I might be interested in learning more about that.
yeah.
Hmm.
Right. And again, if it is or isn't, you learn something, right?
You learn something.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then also too, like what I'm finding now is now that because I'm a pretty good remember of, well, I mean, you have me come and talk about networking, right? And so,
Uh-huh.
like, when people come up and start talking to me about ideas, I probably have somebody in the Rolodex that, hey, I'll connect you with someone like that, or I've got some names, I got some people, I've got things in the field that I can connect you to, even if like I haven't done research in that area, I might still know it because again, these talks and things and interacting with folks and like there's something to make those connections. So the conference becomes these networks that then you take with you, and then you can connect to
Hmm.
folks that haven't been there, right? To those
That's right.
ideas or whatnot.
Okay.
So also, just to go along with that, learning new trends in the field. We've got some major things going on in our field, and just going into here. Hey, how are people reacting to these issues and things? What are people doing to try to, whatever, go on with whatever the movement is? We don't need to get into it now, but just like getting that also too is, what are the trends and issues? Again, that's why we're at a conference, is to like get some ideas there. So
Well, and how to, there's folks in the field who have been here for a while. So there's ways to kind of tap and have them share their knowledge and the patterns that they've noticed of things that have happened. Or maybe there's a situation where you're like, I'm not sure what to do. I've never encountered this before. There's probably someone who has. And so asking for advice from folks who have been around for a while is quite helpful, I think, too.
yeah, it's good. Um, a couple quick ones. One is visit the vendors, their sponsors, right? They might have some resources that you could use, and then you might get a good tchotchke, like a clip or something with a magnet on it that
Yeah.
you're like, ooh, now I got
Swag.
something, a little magnet, a little
Well,
swag.
and I think too, there's a lot of books, right? And so
Right.
sometimes I know back in the day, we didn't always get to see or preview different books online. It's much more prevalent now, but
Yeah.
just going and physically looking at the book and reading through different highlights to see, do I want to buy this book? And
Right.
if I buy it here, then I know that
Like
it's
a
going to
discount.
directly support the author. You get a discount. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
the time they have conference discounts.
Yeah.
You might even, in some cases, get to chat with the author at the different vendors and booths too.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
and a lot of times, again, they're sponsoring, so like they're reducing costs. So like, part of them being sponsors, they want to see people. So it's also good to do that. Um, Especially now as being a head of star
I
fundraising,
think, when you
gotta,
do, yeah,
gotta,
that's right.
gotta do that.
I think
Another thing,
circulating around the vendors too is also a way to decompress from sessions. Like you could just think through some of the things you learned in sessions while also just walking around,
yeah.
you know?
Hmm. And
You're
you got,
still, yeah.
yeah, no, it's good. So maybe that feeds right into this, Jen, staying fit at a conference. At
Thank
AMTE, like there's certain conferences where they feed you really well.
you.
And there's like there's a snack break. Like we just had lunch. Now why are we getting like chips and soda? And it's so like making good choices, making good
Yeah.
choices. Whether but sometimes it's hard to like there's peanut M&Ms there. I really love peanut M&Ms. Want to grab them, but so whether it is making sure to get to move around, walk around the vendors, walk around the conference, or getting up in the morning and get a little workout in. I think there's something there, and also making good. For me, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too old, Jen, but like I know at the lunchtime, like hey, probably load up on the salad, try to avoid the stuff that takes a lot for the stomach to process, so I can actually stay awake for the next session. So I don't see like I'm being offensive to the next person.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, that's why you have the coffee cup, right? So you
There
can
you
go fill
go.
up one more coffee.
That's
That's
right.
every time. I'm just like, refill coffee. I gotta have some
Hmm.
coffee after lunch.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, we didn't do a very good job of actually getting out as much, but even getting out, um,
I worked out every
yeah,
morning, Jen. Every morning.
that's pretty good. No, I
Yeah.
love that because I think when you travel, you get out of your routines.
Yeah.
And I think working out in the morning is one of those. I think another one routine is sleep. And I
Yes.
know some of that it does with time change and stuff, but then when you're sharing your knowledge and finding your people, sometimes you
Yeah.
stay up later than expected.
Yeah.
And then your sleep clock is all off. And like you said, as we're getting older, we're just really very cognizant of getting that sleep that we need to be able to show up and
Yeah.
stay healthy and interact with folks. So,
Hmm. And I know for us, we were like going from like, for me, sometimes it was like with breakfast meetings was like 7 a.m. to like after a set like 8 or something, whatever. People were inviting me to go out in places, and I was like, no,
no,
respectfully, no. Like I need to, decompress, need to
like you said,
prep
there
for the
was
next
one day
day.
you're just like, I'm just going to DoorDash this, or,
Yeah.
I'm just going to get food here and
I'm
just,
outie. Yeah.
I gotta decompress, friends.
Yep. And that
Yeah.
helps me like be present the next day. So I'm not like, or, I remember I went to a meeting one time and I was emailing during a session, and, I had a good, my advisor, Anita, she like yelled me like, hey, you probably should pay attention to this. And somebody was like sharing their life. And I was like, thank you. It was like, be present, taking things
Yeah.
in. We talked about that with Dusty on the roundtable session, like how he was be able to be present in some of the sessions, not just worried about taking copious notes.
Sometimes I think that takes time though. Like we were saying, being healthy, being fit, thinking about those routines and making good choices. Sometimes I think you have to go through not having made those good choices or just knowing, to know that I'm not going to do that again because I won't be present or like physically I won't feel good. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that comes with a little bit of time and just knowing how
Some gray
you,
hairs,
what
maybe.
it
Yeah.
takes. Yeah. What does it take for you to be able to show up in the ways that you want to show up,
Yeah.
right? So maybe that means you need to go back to your room and take a nap for 2 or 3 hours, or maybe that means you need to not conferences can be overstimulating for a lot of folks. I know for
Yeah.
me, when I get back from a conference, like sometimes I try to come back, like if I can, at the same day that the conference ends, and hopefully I have a day to recover.
Hmm.
Because as I've gotten older, I've realized like I need time to recover from the conference because when you feel like you're on for someone who's mostly kind of introverted like myself, like it can be really draining, like much more so than I ever really thought it was until it just hit me like every time I come back from a conference, it's I need a break.
Yeah. I think Jen, that was like I was like laughing because sometimes we'll go into something where there was like I don't know if it was a meal or something like that, and I'm
Hmm.
just like I don't have the energy right now to establish a new friendship, and I'm like,
Yeah.
there's Jen. Like, are they,
Yeah.
there's Courtney, there's there's Nico. Okay, I'm gonna go, connect and like, and so it's it's okay too sometimes to like it's not like hey I'm gonna spread my wings every single opportunity. No, sometimes you just need to like, hey, can we just chill and like or first sheet like hey can we just talk about basketball for a second like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
can we do that and the final thing that I had was planning for future collaborations. So it's not like hey let's get this project going, but like I had several people come up and talk to me and it led to it's going to be future podcast episodes or it's going to be hey let's look at some other opportunities to work together. And it's like all these things. I took notes on them, and it's like I want to follow up on them. And so planning for future collaborations and then follow up on them. Just and even too, if nothing ever comes to fruition, at least like you kept the ball going, right? It's like
Hmm.
that game we trying to keep balloon in the air. At least you put the tap and balloon in the air. At least there's something in their inbox, their email inbox, to keep going to say like, hey, I still want this. And so even if it's delayed, if like I got something where I'm gonna have someone on the podcast in about a month talk about like finances and teachers and stuff like that. It's kind of an interesting perspective, and it's like somebody else is going to come on and talk about some interaction we've had as student and teacher, and so like all these sorts of things that ideas get thrown around. Like let's follow up on
Hmm.
them. Follow up on them. That's again that's kind of the point of this stuff.
So part of that, like following up and kind of connected to how we process and reflect on our experiences and navigating the conferences and how we were present there and what we learned from it. So I have a question for you, Joel, because I see you do this and I go back and forth. Okay. So
Okay.
I noticed that you have a really nice journal. And when you're at conferences, you handwrite notes and ideas.
Yep.
And I know some folks, I've done that. I've also used my iPad and used like Notability as the app that I use, although I know some people
Looks
use
very
GoodNotes.
very fancy. It looks
Very
very
fancy.
fancy.
I know some people get their laptop out and like start like running Google Docs, and everyone has different ways that they record information,
Yep.
different ways that they process. There may be folks that, and I just haven't seen it, where they just literally after a session will just like do an audio note.
Yeah.
Like when Dorothy and I did our session, we debriefed about the session. We usually like record what we say
Yeah.
while we're doing it. And I'm just thinking about, I don't know if this is a prereq thing or if this is like where this is in our conversation, but thinking about what are the ways that you record and reflect on the experiences so they stick and that
Hmm.
you take action in some way. So I
So
guess my question is, what's kept you kind of going to the journal and handwriting in this time of digital ways of recording?
right. So digital disappears for me. Like there's
Okay.
so much there's so many digital places versus I've got one notebook, right? And one
Mm.
notebook and I do the bullet journal method. Talk about this. I did I think an episode in the pandemic about bullet journal and I still keep it going. So that means it's like
We got to
it's
put that in the
sticky.
show notes, I think,
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
link to the
So
show notes on that one.
and so if there's a dot, a dot means it's an action item. And so it's like email Jen
Oh, we have a
regard
code. Okay,
yeah.
we have a code.
Email Jen regarding conversation about so we're going to start doing more podcasts like this because we talked about it, right? We talked about like having more conversational podcasts. And so we're going to do that. And so like, hey, I followed up and here we go. This is an action. And so those actions, yes, they might have like digital footprints somewhere, but the actual action of what's going to start it is in that journal, right? And so it's
Mm.
several things that are happening there. And like one of them is like we wanted to have a poster next year at AMTE because I need an excuse to go because I'm not on the board anymore of like a poster around TMT, our teaching math teaching. and talking about, hey, here's our questions, here's ideas, what are maybe some other roundtables we should have, what are some other guests, that we should, like, use that. Why don't we use AMT every year as an opportunity to talk to our colleagues about how to make the podcast even better to serve needs within the field, right? And so
Right.
that's an action item, right? And that's also goes back to plan for future collaborations, plan how you're going to attend the conference again, right? So a future proposal, or how do you take your proposal and move it to something else? But yeah, for me, I need the physical writing, and also too, like, the ideas that I write down, a lot of times they get stuck in my head. If I write them down, there's a,
They're
like,
stuck.
yeah, because like the
Yeah.
typing, pushing the letter L and pushing the letter P is the same push, right? Like but writing an L or writing a P is a little bit different. So I think analog is a little bit better that way. It's kind of like writing on your brain a little bit.
Does it help you filter too? Because sometimes I think if I'm typing or I'm trying to write down, I'm trying to capture too many things. Whereas if I'm physically writing it with pen to paper, I filter
Yeah.
a little bit more. Like I do like key ideas. But I like this idea that the digital disappears, because I'm just thinking about our experiences in and through the pandemic. So many people shared so many resources. And if we look at our Google folders, our files, the way we organize them, it's like, oh, I want to remember that. I want to remember that. And then I'm like, okay, it's really nice and organized, but then real talk, did I go back to that?
Yeah.
Have I gone back to that? Well, it didn't stick. Like in the moment, it was like, that's awesome. But then like it didn't stick. So I don't know. I feel like I need to move back to doing more of the journaling.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's in one place. So you know where all your conference meetings, however you organize your handwritten journal
Yeah.
is.
And I think for those of you Enneagram fans out there, I'm an Enneagram 1, a perfectionist. And so, like, I've tried a lot of digital.
Ooh, Enneagram. What is that? Is that just how you tend to be, or
There's a podcast episode on that. I'll send that to you.
we're going to put that
That's
in the show notes too.
that in the show notes with
So it kind of tells you like different things about
yeah,
yourself.
right. It's kind of scary when you read. It's called The Road Back to You book. And I think I talked to Nancy Bartelt about it, but it was like, it's kind of scary when you read the description. You're like, ooh, like like a perfectionist, like your biggest critic is yourself. And so that's why I think when I'm thinking about my own teaching, I'm so critical. It takes me so long to plan it, versus when I'm trying to coach up somebody else and like trying to help them move their teaching to something even better. I think I'm better in that role than in my own teaching role, even though I think I'm a pretty good teacher. But
I mean, I know you're going to share this and I'm going to read the book. But I wonder, when you said that with the perfectionist thing, and you don't have to answer this, but it just got me thinking that if you're of certain types, like let's say it's the perfectionist type, is it hard for you to take critical feedback? Or is it no, in fact, I prefer critical feedback?
if it's in relate, and that goes, there's something about being healthy, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in a healthy spot, yeah, it's good because now I can get better, right? But if I'm not,
Right.
then then it's like the inner critic in your head is like, see, I told you,
It
you
just piles
suck.
on.
You
Oh,
know?
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's like
Like the
the tag
timing
team.
of it, right?
Yeah, it's like a
It's like when we
WWE
get
tag team. They're like, yeah, bam, there's an elbow. Ooh, leg drop. Here we go. Body slam.
Oh, that's a good point, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
like the timing of the feedback with everything else that's going on too.
right. Right.
Oh, now I'm
No.
really interested in kind of exploring this, because you
It
said it was a
also,
little.
yeah, it also helps you like understand. So like my son, he likes getting things. He gets things done. He checks things off. He might
Mhm.
go faster than I would do it because I'm overthinking it. But he does. He's just like, hey, I'm going to send him an email. He just sends an email. Like, I mean, boom, like the email's done and sent. So it's like, it's interesting to see how he does things versus how I do things. We both try to get tasks done, but in different, it's just a little bit different way, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's all these different descriptions, and it's healthy as taking it as a filter on trying to understand interactions with people too, right?
Hmm.
So like a person who is a peacemaker, they're really good at seeing all the angles, right? Even if like the angle is not not one like are you serious? Like, but they'll be like, well, have you thought about this? Kind of offering another perspective. And it's like trying to get people to see eye to eye. And it's like, you just want them to be like, yeah, let's pile on. Come on, let's pile. But no, let's think about it. And like, well, like, oh, but it's like, oh, you're a peacemaker. So that's what you do.
Mm.
And so like, it's helpful that way. So, um, yeah, there's a tangent right there for you. See, that's why
No,
we
is
wanted to
this,
do
wait a
these.
minute. Now
But,
this is making me think about Crystal Kellenet Craig shared something with me. Is there also like a questioner is one of
oh
them?
yeah, yep, that's one.
Maybe this is the same book because we were talking about how we're both married to like questioners, I think. Like they don't
No,
take thing at face value and that,
yeah,
they will stand their ground and they will question
yeah.
everything.
And
And it's
Kouzes and
like,
Posner call it. There's a challenge the process person, like that kind
yeah,
of. And that's
yeah.
we. You know what? That's another. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about different sort of profiles, but that's a good other topic. Let's write that down.
Get that, put that
The
in, put a dot next to that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's a dot next to that one. So they're like think about the kid that's the challenge the process kid. That's the kid that usually gets in trouble versus that's the kid that you want, right? Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Like how do I how do I get, they look at the syllabus and be like, oh, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get perfect. I can miss these two assignments. I can skip class twice and I'm still going to keep all my grade. Like they're challenging the
Mm-hmm.
process, right? Versus you're like, no, you just attend every class. Like, no, they figured out the system, right? And so those kids a lot of times, might get into trouble when they're just asking why, right? And we
Yeah.
sometimes we don't want to hear why when exactly that's what we want in teaching math in some of the like, hey, why does this algorithm work? Why is the
Mhm.
Pythagorean theorem exist? Like what happened? Like why? And so versus just taking things at face value. So yeah,
Mhm.
I
Which
got a
is
lot of stuff
lovely,
there.
right? Because I was in class yesterday and we were talking about how we hold a lot of things like intention and two things can be true at the same time. And we were debating things and there was a young man, he said, okay, I don't want to upset anyone, but I don't really think we should be giving homework in schools. And then that opened up a whole nother thing about like, well, what do you mean by homework? Like, how is homework an equity issue? Is there
Yeah.
research that supports we should give homework? And started going down this path of just being critical and asking why. Here are the things that schools have us do, but why?
Right.
And then being very comfortable with having those conversations with like, yeah, you're going to have folks who think this way and you're going to have folks who think an opposing view. You're going to have folks who aren't really sure. And that's a lot of the ways why teaching is messy, why
Yeah.
it's very nuanced, right? It's not
Mhm.
always this or never this. Sometimes it's sometimes this. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Uh okay. Just
So
to
conferences. No.
conferences. How to attend a conference. Hopefully people got
Oh, but
something
that's
on.
part of it, right? So attending a conference, you're going to go to different sessions and people are going to advocate or share different bits of knowledge, right?
Right.
And you have to decide what resonates with you,
Right.
right? Or you
Hmm.
might question certain things, you might be critical of certain things, but that's something when you go into conferences is thinking about how is this impacting like the ways that you're thinking? How are you being a more critical scholar around some of the work that you do?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and going back to the journaling, it's like so at a minimum, and going back to your point about like you learn something, you go to a session, write down the title. That's a circle, having an event, and then there's something I learned from it. Okay,
Hmm.
so even a session I was moderating, which was about math autobiographies, Brian Smith, I think from Minnesota, Duluth, and it's a different perspective on how I was thinking. So I've got that written down, and I'm going to go back to it because it's an assignment that I use. And so, trying to extract and write
Yeah.
something down to represent the
You
moment.
know, this brought up what you just said brought up 2 points for me. Let's see if it's actually connected. But you said something that just sparked an idea.
Oh, we can connect
So
them.
we'll figure out. We'll connect the dots. Sometimes I will go to even the same talk by a presenter because something I've noticed, just as an example, our good friend of the podcast, Mandy Jansen.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard her
Hmm.
talk about rough draft in so many different ways
Yeah, she's been talking about it for a while. Yeah,
for a while, but each time I go to her talk, I hear something different,
right.
right? And so sometimes people say, oh, well, I've already been to that talk. Well, sometimes when it's said in the same way, or maybe a different way, or somebody brings up a question during a session, you can still get something out of that experience.
Well, her own thinking has evolved on it too. Like, I
That's
mean, the
right.
way that
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like she's giving the same exact, just to make sure we're not
No, no, no,
representing
no.
it that
She
way.
gives different ones. I'm just
But
saying some
still,
people might write off, oh, I've been to that talk
yeah,
before. And it's like, and on the, I don't know if I would say on the flip side, but there's also times when I'm like, oh, that's my good colleague and friend. I'm actually not going to go to their talk because I know that I can talk to them about it and get like their one on one perspective in a different space. So that's sometimes how I'll navigate conferences too. Like if I know that person personally, I can probably carve out space or they'll carve out space with me to talk about that work.
yeah,
And then other times I think I've been to that talk or I've seen that talk or I've seen this person present, but now it's something new or maybe it isn't something new. I'll still go to it
yeah,
because I learned something new, even if some of the messages are the same. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw Tanya Bartel in my talk. The last session at the last slot on Saturday, Tanya Bartel came in, and she's
Yeah.
someone that I've admired since I started grad school. So, I mean, it was great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's good
Yeah.
that she came and saw what we had to do, what we had to share, and that was with Angela Harris and Candice Cook. So, all right, we got to wrap this up. But
That's
yeah,
quick.
yeah, it's a quick hour.
Hmm?
Yeah, a quick
That's
hour.
pretty quick. Yeah.
So, but we've been doing some things. So, what's the best thing you've learned lately to help you teach better? Question I asked for everybody.
Ooh.
Best thing you've learned lately to help you teach better? Come on, you got something.
Oh, let's see. I don't know. This what immediately comes to mind is not just from the conference session. Mostly it's the relational. Like I I strive to be a relational scholar,
Yep.
friend, colleague, and I think that through that conference experience, through our conversations today and historically, that I'm on the right path of continuing to focus on being relational. Like I had a student I was chatting with yesterday who said, "Okay, Dr. Wolfe, like I can tell you now, they're doing their student teaching. I believe you." And I'm like, okay,
Hey, there you
what do
go.
you mean? Can you elaborate a little bit? He's like, so what we did, like that first course we had, like I had
I
buy-in.
believe
Well,
you.
no, if I'm being honest, I didn't have buy-in, right? And I was like, okay. It still felt very theoretical. And then we go into the next methods class, and he's like, I had a little bit more buy-in, but some of it was still theoretical. And now I'm in my student teaching, and I'm literally asking myself, what would Dr. Wolfe do? Because he's tried things and they're working. So he's like,
Yeah,
I believe you now. And
yeah,
I'm just like, so something that I've learned lately is that I don't always give myself enough credit for how the work I'm doing in teaching is going pretty okay.
yeah,
Like it's having an impact. So in some ways, it's like keep doing what I've been doing. And part of that keep doing what I've been doing is to call into question and be deep, like deep reflection about why I'm doing what I'm doing. What messages does this send about who can do math and what it means to do math? And in what ways am I being explicit and transparent in the ways that I'm being culturally responsive in the classes that I teach? So that continuing like to learn from and with one another and be relational, like that is the core, that is the center. Don't deviate from that.
from and with,
From and with, yeah.
from and with. That's good.
I think that's what is coming up for me right now.
Yeah,
What
awesome.
about you, Joel?
Lately, it's the whole let him do it. Like if you're gonna teach him, teach it. Let him do
Yeah.
it. Let him. It can be like, oh, they're not ready yet. That whole idea about not ready yet is like
Yeah.
things that hold back, like special education, they hold people back. Like sometimes it's okay to minimal introduction. Let's let them try. Let them try something teaching, right?
Mhm.
Because they have some sort of inclinations. Maybe challenge them a little bit, and then see what happens. And okay, Let's build on what we did well and let's keep going. So like, let's put a starting point out there. Let's put the y-intercept out there so that we can start getting better, versus like, okay, you need this and then you need this and then you need this. And like pretty soon it's like, you're trying to like start a hike and you've already overloaded them and they can't even walk anywhere because they've got so much on their back that they're trying to do. And versus like, hey, like we just did a little like teaching instructional strategies. We call it professional development, where it's like you're going to learn about an instructional strategy, you're going to use it, and that way you'll teach it to the rest of us. Kind of a jigsaw sort of thing. It is a jigsaw, and it's like lots of different ways that people did it, but they tried and they put something out there. And yeah, we're saying like, hey, when you ask folks to get in an activity and start doing something, don't just stand at the front. Go look around, see what they're doing. Are they successfully engaging with it? Are they having some struggles? See what there is. Don't just stand up at the front. Like it's like a little thing, but it's better, caught than taught sometimes. And so like getting them to say like, hey, ooh, look at what they just did. They had some cycle. They saw some problems. They were able to address it. Now, they made a tweak because of what they saw. That's formative assessment. So it's let's go, and that was the name of our talk too. Stop the preaching and let them teach. So let's go.
So it's really like, let them have like, no, this is connecting to something that I've shifted in my teaching recently, as much as this semester, where you want them to have the experiences first. So sometimes I've done it where they read about and then we do. But it's been more powerful for them to have experiences in class sometimes first before reading about the thing that we're doing, because then they have something to draw on and it kind of moves better to the theory to practice kind of realm.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's like, hey, let them have experiences first and then kind of call out or attend to the different ways that they're doing the things that they're doing and the different readings or things we've explored in class already.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe? Kind of? Okay.
Well, and there's a great book, What Do Video Games Have to Teach Us About Language and Literacy, or Learning and Literacy? And, it's like people don't read the manual on the video game. They jump right in. They start hitting some buttons, right? And a lot of times a good video game will teach you how to play it. And so, but still, it's like you jump in, like pretty soon you're like, I wonder how you do this. And then maybe you go find out, right? Or you ask a question of a colleague or a peer, so it's like, we see this already, we don't have to like, again, read the manual before we jump in and start doing it. So,
yeah.
One other thing I've been doing is talking about an album of the episode. You got any albums like you think about, like not just a song, but like a full album experience? Could be way back in the day, whatever. Do you have an album that you would recommend? Because I've been getting into vinyl as my midlife crisis. But I'm just curious.
You mean just to like for like that's related to what we're talking about now, or just
no idea?
general?
No, just complete. This is a way just to get connected with people, building relationship.
Oh, okay. So just an album.
Yeah, like what's an album that you've enjoyed ever, or just one that pops in your head? Like, just something like, I'd
immediately one that's popping in my head is Kendrick Lamar's DNA album.
There we go.
He won a Pulitzer Prize for that album. And I mean, he's just genius.
Yeah.
Like lately I've gone down the rabbit hole of like, just even this last weekend where we had the Super Bowl and that performance, right?
Yeah.
And then just the way he is able to tell a story.
Yeah.
Like, and I've been watching all these video breakdowns of his different albums and the Super Bowl, and it's just like, this man's a genius. I mean, it's just
it's a lot of layers.
Like, it's so many layers. Like, it's art and entertainment, both. And it's just, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing. So I think, but that particular album, I really enjoy listening to, and I've gone back to quite a few times.
There we go. I'm going to name, I've already used Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors, but it's a different album. It's called Find Your People from Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors. It's one of his latest ones. He did a volume 1 and a volume 2, but he actually hit it big. Like you may have heard Find Your People out there. It was on he did a Macy's Day float, maybe not this past year, but the year before. And and I've seen him perform on the Find Your People tour here in Oxford, Mississippi. But he's one of our favorite artists, and that's a good cover-to-cover album. There's some good, some bangers on that one. I really enjoy it.
Oh, nice.
And so there you go. And it relates to our it does relate to our conversation. So there we go.
It immediately relates to our conversation.
Yeah. Anything to promote, Jen?
No, I mean, we talked about, we have some book chapters coming up. So I think some folks who are interested in like, how do you build community? And I think some of the lessons that we have in there are ways that you could think about building community, not just in your pre-service teacher classes, but in different aspects of your life. So I would encourage folks to, when it comes out, or check back with the show notes. So that you can.
We have lots of links in our show notes. Holy cow. Mm-hmm. Previous episodes and conferences and all sorts of different things. All right. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel. It's always good to be in conversation with you.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Amidon Planet podcast. Show notes can be found at amidonplanet.com/episode 120. For those of you looking for ways to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode, which will allow more people looking for similar content to find it. In addition, you can subscribe. We got the Amidon Planet, I think we're calling it Dispatch now, containing teacher resources and updates from Amidon Planet. You can find join the email list buttons all over amidonplanet.com. You can also submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amidonplanet.com. In addition, I'm always looking for opportunities to work with those who are looking to lead people to love others through teaching. If you have an event or opportunity to share, you can either send an email to joel@amidonplanet.com or head to amidonplanet.com/about to fill out the request a call form. Thank you for spending time on Amidon Planet. Thanks to Jen for sharing her time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there for learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.